بالله العلي العظيم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. Let's see who's here today. Middle. All right. Hey, everybody. We're getting through this Suhrawardi course pretty quickly. So, let's see here. Wait for other people to join. There's Hussein. He's trying to get in. All right. What we'll do, we'll read the first half of the Simorgh's shrill cry, Risale Safir Simorgh, which is a more philosophical, suluki kind of treatise. It's an important one to understand some of Suhrawardi's concepts. So without further ado, let's start to read this in Mr. Thaxton's translation. I will try to have to you Corban's French rendering, inshallah, by the end of next week. So you have that as well. But let's start to read. Let me just turn this on because it's starting to get really warm here again, here in south of the equator. Simorgh's shrill cry. Risale Safir Simorgh. In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, in him is might and power. Praise be to the giver of life and originator of all extant things, and praise to the masters of apostleship and leaders of prophecy, especially the Lord of the great law and the guide of the most sublime path, Muhammad the chosen. May God pray for him and grant him peace. These few words have been penned on the conditions of the brethren of abstraction. Ikhwan Tajrid. This treatise is in two divisions, the first on origins and the second on aims. It is called the Simorgh's Shrill Cry, or Safir Simorgh. It will not be detrimental to recall by way of an introductory preface something of this bird's conditions and place of habitation. Those who have been illuminated have shown that every hoopoe that abandons his nest in springtime and plucks his feathers with his beak and sets off for Mount Qaf will fall under the shadow of Mount Qaf within the span of 1,000 years. Of the time referred to in the text, 1 day with thy Lord is 1,000 years of those which he compute, or you reckon. وَإِنَّ يَوْمًا عِنْدَ رَبِّكَ كَالْأَلْفِ السَّنَةِ مِمَّا تَعْدُونَ. These 1,000 years in the calendar of the people of reality are but one dawning ray from the orient of the divine realm. During this time, the hoopoe becomes a Simorgh whose shrill cry awakens those who are asleep. The Simorgh's nest is on Mount Qaf. His cry reaches everyone, but he has few listeners. Everyone is with him, but most are without him. You let this person in. You are with us, and you are not with us. Ba ma'i va ba ma nei. Johnny as unpeda nei. You are the soul, hence you are not apparent. The ill who totter on the brink of dropsy and consumption are cursed by his shadow, and it causes various symptoms to vanish. The Simorgh flies without moving, and he soars without wings. He approaches without traversing space. All colors are from him, but he himself has no color. Just before I go on, Mr. Thaxton is making the arbitrary decision to provide gender to the pronouns of the Simorgh, although the Persian has no gender. So in Persian, it is not a he, just so you know. His nest is in the Orient, but the oxen is not void of him. All are occupied with him, but he is free of all. All are full of him, but he is empty of all. All knowledge emanates and is derived from his shrill cry, and marvelous instruments such as the organ have been made from his trilling voice. Since you have not seen Solomon, what do you know of the bird's language? Where is it? چون ندیدی همی سلیمان را تو چه دانی زبان مرغان را. That is the translation of the poem that I just read. His food is fire, and whoever binds one of his feathers. Mary is trying to get in. His food is fire, and whoever binds one of his feathers to his right side and passes through fire will be safe from burning. The zephyr is from his breath, hence lovers speak their heart's secrets and innermost thoughts with it. These words that have been scrivened here are but a puff of breath emanating from an incomplete account of his proclamation. Part 1. Initial Things. The first part of this treatise on initial things is in 3 sections. The first on the superiority of this knowledge, second on what appears to neophytes, third on the Sakina. The second part is on aims, and it is in 3 sections. The first on annihilation, the second on the proposition that the more cognizant one is, the more perfect one is, and the third on proving man's ability to delight in God. Section 1. The superiority of this knowledge over all others. It is apparent to the illuminated that the preference of one type of knowledge over another may be for several reasons. It may be firstly because the thing known is nobler, such as the superiority of a goldsmith to a saddler, because the former deals with gold while the latter works with wood and wool. Another reason is that the knowledge may have more compelling logical proofs than another type of knowledge. A third reason is that the occupation with the superior knowledge may be more important and beneficial. This is a very Aristotelian approach to this whole question. Now, all the criteria for superiority are found in this knowledge in comparisons with other types of knowledge. With regard to aims and goals, it is apparent that it is in this knowledge that the aim and object to be known is God, and that he's too great to be compared with other existing things. From the point of view of establishing logical argumentation and corroboration of proof, it is obvious that empiricism is more valid than argumentation. And the masters of the art of the dialectic allow that God may give man the necessary knowledge to know his existence and attributes. Now, it is allowed that such knowledge may be acquired by some. There's no doubt it would be preferable to that which necessitates the burden of observation, the labor of reasoning, the onslaught of doubt, and entangle with suspicions. One of the Sufis was asked, "What is the proof of the Creator's existence?" He replied, "The morning renders the lamp unnecessary." Another of them says, "One who seeks God through logical proof is like someone searching for the sun with a lamp." The masters of epistemological methodology hold as an accepted truth that and are unanimously agreed that in the next world God may create for his servants a power of perception in their visual faculty so that they may see him directly. Reason. Proof and instruction are of no consideration in the eyes of the people of truth. On this basis, it is possible for him to create in the heart something like this perception so that the one may see him directly in this world. It is for this reason that Omar said, "My heart saw my Lord." And Ali said, "Were the veil lifted, I would not be more certain." Herein are mysteries concealed that are not suitable for this discourse. With regard to importance, there's no doubt that for man, there is nothing more important than the supreme felicity. Nay, in comparison with that, all goals fall short. And the greatest means of access is cognitive knowledge, for by all criteria it has been established that cognition is nobler than all the other types of knowledge. Idrak is cognition, but idrak in this context of Suhrawardi is more than just ratiocination in the Aristotelian sense. It is not full-blown marifa, but it is beyond ratiocination. Junaid said, were I to know that there was beneath the skies a type of knowledge nobler than that into which the masters of cognition delve, I would engage myself solely with it, and I would endeavor by whatever means to acquire it until I had it. Section 2, on what is apparent to neophytes. The first flashes of lightning that come from the divine presence to the seeker spirits are the flares and beams, tabali and laba'e, which are luminaries that break pleasurably like dawn over the seeker's soul. Their onset is like a sudden lightning bolt, bark, that comes unexpectedly and swiftly departs. It is he who causeth the lightning to appear to you to strike fear and to raise hope. That is, fear of its passing away and hope that it may remain. In another regard, this is the allusion to the times, waqt or awqat, of the masters of abstraction, as the Sufis called these flashes times, waqt. It is for this reason that one says, time is sharper than a sword. It is also said, time is a cutting sword. In the divine word, there are many references to this. For example, the brightness of his lightning wanted but little at taking away the sight. Vasiti was asked why some people are troubled during the Sama. He said, it is a light that appears and it is then folded up. And he gave this line as an example. The thought of her occurred in the heart's thought appeared and then dwindled away. The provision shall be prepared for them therein morning and evening. I don't know why these Quranic quotations were put into this archaic script. They could have just italicized it. Silly decision by the editor of this edition. These flashes do not come at all times, as there are periods when they cease altogether. But the more ascetic exercise is increased, the more the flashes come until one reaches the stage where one recalls something of the otherworldly conditions in everything one sees. Suddenly, these flashes of light become continuous, as a consequence of which the limbs may begin to quiver. The apostle says in expectation of this state, as is well known from the prophetic locution, your Lord gives forth blasts of his mercy during the days of your time. Will you not then turn to face that? When the ascetic practitioner is afflicted by languor, he seeks assistance through the subtle contemplation and pure recollection against impure thoughts in order to regain his former state. It is also possible for someone who does not practice ascetic disciplines to experience this state at times without being aware of it. If one waits on festival days when people go out to the prayer field and great noises, exaltations and loud shouts take place and the sound of cymbals and clarions prevail. If one is endowed with vision and a sound nature and recollects holy states, one will experience a very pleasant sensation. Again, in war, which is a time when men clash, warriors shout, horses neigh, drums are beat, and battle reaches a pitch with the headlong rushing of men and the brandishing of swords. If one's mind is slightly clear, even though one may not be ascetically disciplined, one will experience something of this state, provided that one recollect during that time holy states and recalls the souls of the departed, the vision of divine might, and the ranks of the hosts of heaven. So also, if one is seated on the galloping horse and urging it to charge faster and imagines that one is rushing out of the body, leaving it behind in its place. If one imagines that an overwhelming awe is being produced within oneself, that one is going abstractly and psychically into the presence of the self-subsistent al-qayyum, rushing into the ranks of the celestials, in such a state too, an effect will be produced in one, even though one may not be an ascetic adept. Herein are mysteries that these days are fathomed by few. When these flashes come to men, an effect reaches the brain and may appear as though the vein in the brain, the shoulder or back, has begun to throb violently, though very pleasurably. One may be helped by the sama, and the pleasure will be even more intense, although this is still the first stage. On the sakina, or the Shekinah. Then, when the lights of the mystery reach their limit and do not pass quickly away, but rather linger longer, it is called the Sakina, the pleasure of which is even more perfect than the pleasure of the other flashes. When men return to the normal human state out of the Sakina, they are greatly sorry to have been parted from it, on which point one of the pious said, "O breeze of nearness, how beautiful you are. He who has alighted in you has tasted intimacy. What kind of pleasure have they who have drawn near? They were given to drink of holiness from your watering place." Suhrawardi has some very interesting terms that he coins for the Sakina in his Waradat wa Taqdisat, one of which is absolutely beautiful, Sanubara Lo, which means the pine cone of light. Sanubara is kind of an Arabization of the Persian Sinovar, which is also Cinnabar as well, and has an association with that. But it's primarily also means pine cone. Another one is Walidat al-Quds, the daughter of holiness, is another one of his terms. The Sakina is mentioned many times in the glorious Quran. Then God sent down his security, Sakina, and in another place he says, "It is he who sendeth down secure tranquility, Sakina, into the hearts of the true believers. Then they may increase in faith beyond their former faith." One thing that I don't like that Mr. Thaxton is doing here, he, contrary to the kind of sense that we get in the Persian that is right next to it, the Sakina is actually personified as a theophanic figure by Suhrawardi. In this rendering by Thaxton, because he's also not noting it, he's kind of depersonalizing the whole thing. Well, whereas in the main text, it is actually quite personalized. One who has the Sakina can read men's thoughts and knows also unseen things, and his purpose capacity is perfected. The chosen one, Al-Mustafa, was speaking of this when he said, "Beware the believer's perplexity, for he sees by God's light." One of my favorite prophetic hadith. Concerning Omar, the apostle said, "The Sakina speaks through Omar's tongue." He also said, "In my community there are those who tell things and those who speak, and Omar is one of them." The possessor of the Sakina hears extremely subtle calls from sublime paradise, and the addresses of spirituality reach him, and he is calm. As is mentioned in the divine revelation, shall not man's heart test securely in the meditation of God? He observes forms of exquisite freshness and subtlety through direct communication with the celestial powers. This is the intermediate stage in the stages of the people of love, Ahle Esh or Ahle Hope. In a state between wakefulness and sleep, one hears horrible voices and strange cries, and in the unconscious state of the Sakina, one sees great lights. One's euphoria may be so great that one becomes debilitated. Such events happen to masters, not to those who shut their eyes in solitude and let their imagination take flight. If those people glimpse anything of the true lights, they will be sorry they did. Then shall they perish who endeavor to render the signs of God of no effect. And we'll leave it here for this week. Next week, we will cover the second section on the aims and then finish this treatise altogether. And now the floor is open to anybody who wants to say anything. Anybody? Come on, people. Surely there's something on your mind.
Okay.
Assalamu
let's
alaikum. I
see.
was double muted. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Just actually, I wanted to start with more of a quick sort of historical question. When reading Suhrawardi's references to asceticism, what types of ascetic practices was he fond of? What did he do?
Vegetarianism is something that he mentioned right at the end of the the hymn to the perfect nature. Um, Basically, abstaining from animal flesh was one of the kind of the basis of it. Something that a lot of neophytes are recommended when they enter the Hanukkah in Iran. For at least 40 days, they are told to abstain from all animal products, anything with any animality in it. That's the first thing that they prescribe. Then it gets taken up a notch to um, refraining from speaking at certain times. I was given a 40-day at one point where I was not allowed to indicate. So that means whether by your eyes or by your fingers, you're not allowed to indicate for 40 days. You can speak, but you can't indicate without speaking.
Wow.
So yeah, every order has its own versions of ascetic practices. And the thing is, with a lot of these practices, if you fail, then you have to start at day one again. So if you're, 40 day of not indicating at some point, let's say on the second day you indicate, then you're back to one again. And so on and so forth. Same with the eating regimens or the recitation regimens. Like, for example, there was one I was given where you recite the light verse of the Quran for 40 days. And each day that you start, you have to start it a minute behind the first day that you started. So that by the end of the 40th day, you are 40 minutes behind in time from the first day that you started. Right? And you have to really pay, and you do this 3 times a day. And each time you have to like move the minute back. And so that gives you not only, that you have to do the light verse 3 times a day, but also you have to be extremely mindful of the actual time that you're doing it precisely. And it goes on and on. I mean, it's self-mortification, abstaining for food for days on end. Like I mentioned, I think once I did an 11-day water fast where you're not allowed to eat anything. You can drink all the water that you want. You're allowed 1 tablespoon of honey so that your intestines don't go bad during that 11 days.
Right.
After the 5th day, everything comes out of your head, literally. And there are so many different
Wow,
examples.
that's incredible. So,
Yeah, there's so many different examples one can cite. Yeah.
right. So the canonical fasting of Ramadan can really be intensified with all of these like
Yes.
additional
Yeah.
fasting disciplines.
I don't know what currently those in Iran are doing, but most of the Iranian Sufi orders always started fasting 10 days before the Ramadan began. So you make the whole thing a cycle of an arba'in or a childa
Right.
for Ramadan. That's basically what I've done every year. So I start 10 days before, calculate when Ramadan starts, and go through all the month, 10 days before, and then all the way to 30 days. Some of the early ones I did, I remember, were extremely tough. You're either not allowed to eat certain foods, or not allowed to do certain things, and on it goes. And this is all about breaking habit, because this is the thing that ego functions by habit. And until you understand that pattern of habit, however it is done, you don't get to conquer it in any meaningful sense. These are some of these practices, these ascetic practices can be extremely confrontational and confronting. But I think as cathartic psychological exercise, they're probably, if they're done, under the supervision of someone qualified, they are extremely cathartic experiences, better than any 20 and 30-year period sitting in an armchair of a therapist can accomplish. Because
Right.
it, once you get to a certain period of time, you're no longer having to even hide these contents of the subconscious from yourself. They come right out, right in front of you. You're forced to deal with it. And if you're not
You
allowed,
can't,
go ahead, go ahead.
it's like you can't lie to yourself
Yeah,
anymore, the
no,
way a lot of people habitually lie to themselves about reality, about
exactly.
themselves.
Yeah. And so you're dealing with yourself And if you don't have any kind of an escape hatch, if you can't like leave the khalwa, or if you can't leave the arba'in or something, you have to go through it. So you basically have to deal with your own stuff, um, you know, as a kind of, it's a very confrontational thing. And if you don't have the fortitude, the inner fortitude, you will either leave, or you will have, you'll have a, some kind of a psychotic break, which some people do. Yeah, it is literally digesting your own mind. That is what you do. So by digesting your own mind, this is the cleansing process, just like the body does it. The body, digests its own toxins to cleanse itself. The mind must likewise digest its own contents to cleanse itself. Something that contemporary psychology doesn't really seem to get its head around anymore. Although most traditional systems of psychology and ascetic psychology all knew this as an axiom.
Fascinating. Thank you. I'll let someone else go for right now.
Okay. Hassan, you wanted to say something?
Sidi, I want if you can shed little more light the three examples which Sheikh Suhrawardi gives about persons who can get flashes from their lights, who are usual, normal persons. It starts with page 95, where the first situation, which is describe the days of Eid, the festival days,
Yeah.
is the first example. The second example is in battle, the state of war. And the third example is while galloping of horse. What is the spatial in this situation which may provoke such states of enlightenment, let's say, during them?
Very good question. I mean, from a contemporary kind of a yoga point of view, you could say it's the Kundalini, it's the subtle centers. Alauddin Semnani, the famous Kubrawi master, was actually on the battlefield fighting the Mongols when he had his Fana experience. He had his sword in hand, galloping into the into the enemy ranks when he had the full-blown Fana experience of God. So this is very interesting because Suhrawardi says something, I mean, almost graphically, that one of the great late medieval masters of the Kubrawi path actually experienced, Semnani. So when these lights, it's interesting that Suhrawardi uses the image of bark, lightning, because in Sama, right, or even galloping, all of these have it's this motion going on, up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And in the physiology of, the subtle physiology of tantric kundalini, these are the subtle centers of the base chakra, right? That is being ignited. That is where they say the serpent is coiled, the serpent power is coiled. And from my experience of Sama in the Iranian setting, this is exactly what you are activating with the movements of the Sama. Now, the Mevlevis turn and they ignite it that way, but in this motion of up and down, like head banging with the rhythm and drums and all of that stuff playing in the background, this also brings it out pretty fast. And so one of the things he says, people who feel throbbing sensations in the back of their neck, pleasant, right? I've experienced all of that inside the Sama. Especially when during the course of the Sama, it gets so ecstatic, right? And you start beginning to forget what is going on around it. You get, kind of a group mind develops during the zikr of the Sama. As you start to come down, then you start to feel these sensations in the back of your neck. And Some of the onset of these come with flashes, right? Because you've been going up and down, up and down, up and down. So this kind of recreates this, kind of lightning-like effect in the mind. Suhrawardi is also mentioned in this. Yeah. I mean, most contemporary psychology would say some of this stuff is psychosomatic, but that kind of begs the question: what does that mean? Especially in the context of this, these flashes of illumination can also be contextualized as the mind kind of shaking itself from its own veils and slumber. Call it psychosomatic, but that's what happens. Because these feelings of ecstasy and this collective group mind that develops between a group of people in a circle that are reciting a zikr, these generate immense occult power. And I mean, I don't know of many, psychologists or, even anthropological psychologists who have spent too much time researching these things in any kind of depth, as observers up close rather than, just basically theorizing and pontificating about them. So these imagery, in my opinion, are valid. They can also be explained by contemporary terms, but contemporary terms cannot really penetrate the depths of what these experiences bring and what they mean ultimately.
And on one more place, I'm not sure if I understand correctly. In page 97, it is in the end of the page. In a state between wakefulness and sleep, one hears horrible voices and strange cries. And in the unconscious state of the Sakina, one seeks great light. That, at least on the surface level, it is describing two states between wakefulness and a sleep state. You can perceive all the horrible things, and then when you're completely unconscious, then comes the good things. At least this is the literal meaning which I'm taking. What exactly
I've
is
actually
the point
experienced, at
here?
least as a child, I was experienced the very opposite of this. I remember up until about probably 11, 12 years old, I would be experiencing these lights that Suhrawardi talks about in the half waking, half sleep state. And even to the point that I recall these feelings, precisely the kind of nostalgia that he was talking about, because I would wake up and I was nostalgic about what I had actually experienced, which was inexpressible in any human language. And they were lights that I was experiencing in that kind of state. So the horrible voices and strange cries were basically this world pulling you magnetically back into itself. The density of the world of matter. That's how I was experiencing it. Whereas the tranquility, or even not even the word tranquility, but the expansion or expansiveness was by me up until that age being experienced in that, in between waking and sleeping states.
Okay, thank you, Sini.
Sure thing.
I just had a couple of comments or observations. The first is the whole, this is on page 93. And what's interesting about this is that Suhrawardi is, I think, introducing a concept of proof and demonstration which is not logical. The translation kind of obscures it.
Yeah, because he's basically arguing for knowledge by presence in a kind of an allegorical kind of way. This is what he's doing in that paragraph. But Thaxton's translation is not very subtle at all. It's not, he's barely footnoting anything either to explain anything. Yeah.
Yeah, he takes it for granted that the word dalil is necessarily a logical proof, but we know from someone like Mullah Sadra that we can use these terms in a completely different way. And so I think that's what he's doing here. Also,
like, for example, he's been Thaxton's been criticized by this Landolt, for this very word. He's using the word empiricism for mushahede. Now,
yeah.
I mean, you could make an argument that shuhud is empirical, right? Because it's you're witnessing it. But mushahede is not empiricism. This is reducing this concept to a very narrow-minded Western philosophical category or scientific or epistemic category, which is not what Suhrawardi intends.
Yeah, it's not clear that he understands what the passage is about because of the translations of Dalil and Burhan too.
This was the great Persianist of Harvard, Mr. Wheeler M. Thaxton.
Yeah, the review by Landolt was great. He gets him on like every single thing.
Yeah. This is very deceptive. This part, yeah.
But I mean, just you can just tell from the classification scheme that's being expressed that that's not what it means, because here logical proof is a class of dalil. So it can't be the case that dalil means logical proof. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that this idea of the proof that's not logical is really interesting. I mean, I'm not surprised to find it here. We know that Suhrawardi has this
logistic. Suhrawardi would if he had known about the tetralemma of the Stoics and also the Far East, whether you're dealing with some of the Indian or some of the Buddhist schools, because that is a category of logic. It's accepted now as a system of logic, even though contemporary symbolic or analytic philosophers don't like that system because it's too mystical for them. But it's a valid form. So what Suhrawardi means by that kind of logic is what he's talking about, the syllogism, the Aristotelian and excluded middles kind of stuff. That's what he's subtly critiquing.
Yeah, right. Through this concept of mushahada, and this text actually has it does have ma'rifa on 94. I think yours had something different, but this one for cognitive knowledge, it actually does have ma'rifa.
Yeah,
So that was just one thing, but thinking about
و سال معرفت از پس از جمله و وجوه ثابت گشت که معرفت شریفتر است از جمله علوم. Yeah, you're right. It's not idrak. He's using the word معرفت. Yeah. So yeah, it's not cognitive knowledge. This is full-blown gnosis. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like he's talking about that throughout this first part. I think what he's talking about is imaginal perception. There's all these different indications that's what he means by mushahada here and ma'rifa, because he mentions that God can create a power of perception in their visual faculty so that they may see him directly, and a little bit later when he's describing the sakina, he also uses this kind of language. And what does he say? on 97, the person with the sakina observes forms, suwar, of exquisite freshness and subtlety through direct communication with the celestial powers. I mean, I don't know about that. I'm curious about that translation too. Maqamat al-alwi or ulwi.
Or Jadi or Ali or Al. Yeah.
So like elevated stations. I mean, I ask because celestial powers by itself seems to indicate imagination in Suhrawardi, just because the souls of the spheres have this pure imagination.
See, he should have, Thaxton should have thoroughly footnoted this particular page. His translation is also extremely misleading. Making one thing that Suhrawardi is saying, actually the subtlety of the language in the original Persian with the Arabic quotation that Suhrawardi puts in it nuances it very significantly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's all of that, and then at the very end, this is the intermediate stage in the stages of the people of love. So I haven't read the second part. I'm imagining this goes even higher, but
yeah, it does.
But it does seem like this entire part one has the theme of the imagination going through it.
Yes, it does. Yeah. The next part, he starts to talk also about Tawheed, and the expressions to that end, which is very important, very subtle argument about what Tawheed actually is to the people of truth.
Yeah. I think that's it. I can add just something that struck me in the initial description of the Simorgh, where he's attributing all of these coincidence of opposites. I just found the language was really striking, especially all are occupied with him, but he is free of all. All are full of him, but he is empty of all. And that language, the very last phrase, is something I recently encountered in this book by this guy named David Dida, who's like, he talks about the masculine, and it's a book called the Way of the Superior Man, and it's all about masculinity and femininity, and this is the way that he describes the masculine and the feminine. He says that the masculine is always striving for emptiness, and he goes through different dimensions of life, and the feminine is always striving for fullness. And that's the only other place I've seen this language, but it brought up that whole kind of yin yang kind of dichotomy where the feminine is seeking to be filled, and we could translate this into the spiritual register, right? So the soul, all of us who are hearing the cry of the Simorgh are in this sort of feminine position of being filled with this light, and the Simorgh is like, I guess, occupied with other stuff, occupied with higher things or with the fire that it consumes, but we're all occupied with it. This is just striking language.
Yeah, very interesting. The female represents the cataphatic function, and the male the apophatic function. Interesting way of looking at it. There's some truth to it on some level. But these registers can also simultaneously be flipped on their head, as even Arabic does, and also some of the Indian schools do. Where, I mean, to attribute that apophatic kind of symbol and attribute to the male is revealing, because it actually says that the culture that conceives of the male in those terms is an ascetic culture where the male is concerned, right? And that it looks upon the female as, kind of the embodiment of matter itself, right? Man is trying to remove himself from the material world. Female is trying to incessantly replenish herself through it. There's a lot of cultural language within that in terms of spirituality. It's very good description of Judeo-Christian conceptions of society and of the male-female role as they conceive it biblically. In Islam, I can tell you that this is a lot more fluid, and especially in more esoteric and Gnostic approaches, both of these registers would be flipped on their heads from that symbolic angle. So the woman would be the apophatic figure, and the male would be the cataphatic. Especially since it is the male that goes out there, is working, is the provider, right? So, these registers are not set in stone, but that reveals a lot about this author. He says something like that.
Yeah, those are his. I guess those are his assumptions.
Evola talks in these terms as well. I mean, his otherwise interesting book, Eros and the Mysteries of Love, the Metaphysics of Sex, is a good book, except that he absolutizes the genders. He talks about the absolute male and the absolute female, and then he says some extremely silly things between the gnosis of the people of the north, the Hyperborean kind of gnosis, and the people of the south, or the people of the south of the continent. The shamanic and all that. That he criticize, one is superior. This, from my point of view, is utter horse manure. But otherwise, the rest of the book is quite interesting. He also said things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was hoping. I mean, this kind of reveals also what I've been thinking about. Throughout these courses, we haven't really gotten a chance to talk about sex and gender, which are such hot button topics these days. But I would, think that metaphysics can definitely shed light on these things.
Well, we did in the final chapter of Muhammad of the Fusus al-Hikam. It's all over that.
Yeah.
We talked about, when we get to that in the Ibn Arabi course, we can even explore that even further and look at some of the commentaries on those particular passages. But it is a extremely important, and it's a very hot topic button. Where I diverge with contemporaries, obviously, is I look at these things from metaphysical points of view, not from social construction point of view. Although, yes, a lot of the stuff is socially constructed. We just saw right now with this author and the way that he's essentializing these functions of male and female, reading apophasis into one and cataphasis into the other. So yeah, and there's a lot of fluidity to one or the other. Gender is on that symbolic level, when you move beyond the biological, on that symbolic level, is extremely fluid. Its symbolism, this feminine symbol permeates everything, including in masculine ones, and vice versa. Feminine symbolism is informed then by masculine symbols in a very alchemical way. Sometimes it's not logical at all. For example, when you look at alchemy, the difference between salt and mercury, right? The malleability of mercury as a substance, it has fascinated me, ever since I started studying alchemy. Even though salt would tend to neutralize it, and you need salt and mercury together to build, to reach the final stage of building the stone. Yet, in my opinion, especially when you read the text, Mercury is the superior element. The salt is just basically that final element that is brought together to coagulate the mercury for the stone building. But the mercury is everywhere. It's permeating everything. It's interacting with absolutely everything there is. And it's a feminine symbol in alchemy.
Oh, I've always understood Mercury as the hermaphrodite.
It's also
Yes.
taken in that sense, but in most Islamic as well as European alchemical texts, it's taken as a female. And also in the Chinese Taoist alchemical tradition, it's also symbolized as a female. You have these Shaolin depictions of it in the form what they also call cinnabar as well. We have these women dressed like goddesses riding atop these plant kind of formations that look like mushrooms.
Hmm.
It's very interesting. It's all right.
Hmm.
That is their representation of that substance of mercury.
Interesting.
Mm.
Yeah, I would love to talk. I just realized I just don't have a good grasp on these things. Like even just this conversation, I'm like, I don't know what I thought I knew. It seems like a deep conversation to have from a metaphysical standpoint.
I like what Karen Barad did and started doing. She's got a lot of critics, but I like her style and I like her book on quantum physics, where she brings a lot of this conversation about gender and social construction, all that into it, because she inadvertently actually starts to articulate these Ahsayan principles of reverse hylomorphism in it. It's an extremely interesting book. I'll upload it. I've uploaded it once before on that list. But yeah, absolutely. I believe that these conversations need to be had, but one has to be both sensitive and non-ideological, as well as penetrating, not to circle any wagon one way or the other. To get to the truth of the matter.
Yeah, because there's plenty of discourse about it, but it doesn't seem informed by these traditions. A lot of it is not.
Actually, it is, but in extremely elusive symbolic terms. Very elusive, very secret. The alchemical tradition, I think, in all of its vectors around the world, offers quite a rich tapestry of symbolism to draw on for any kind of conversation to that end. Yeah.
And probably astrology too. I mean, it comes up.
Yeah.
I know a bunch of astrologers, and a lot of them are part of the LGBTQ community, and so that gives us a way of talking about these things. But yeah, hopefully we get to do it some more.
No
Thank you.
worries. Anybody else? Riaz, Jeff?
That treatise was a lot different from any of the ones that we had read previously, I found. Something about it, I'm not exactly sure what it is that I'm thinking of, but it's quite different.
It's a manual.
And
that's the reason.
Oh yes. I like the allusion. I think it was the first page of the treatise where the hoopoe turns into the Simorgh.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of an earlier treatise where, what was it, a falcon turns into a hawk eventually. Although this seems to be on a much more profound level. But anyway, the thing that gives me problems is the literal interpretation of some of the things. Like you already addressed this with Hassan, talking about the flashes and flares and the sights and sounds. And it's really hard to get into it and to relate to it, in a normal, sober, everyday state of mind. You know what I mean? Like you almost have to, you'd almost have to be like, I hate to use the word tripping because it sounds so mundane there, but you'd have to be in an altered state of consciousness either now or relatively recently to kind of really kind of engage with this particular treatise. I find it's very deep and it's almost somewhat futile to just read it, and without actually like being on a retreat or something, going through the motions.
It is a manual, and it's a manual of wayfaring, and it is written for a specific class of wayfarers. So the falcon and the Simorgh imagery is very profound because what it's basically, there's so many different layers to this. The falcon who becomes the Simorgh is basically the soul of the Sulik that joins with the divine. Whether you take the divine as the active intellect or beyond. Okay? Whatever cosmology you use. And just remember where it said in one of the earlier treatises that there is Simorgh is being born and dying every day. Right? If we then join these symbolisms together from the other allegories, then this is basically, the journey of not just one Salik to become master and dying, but the journey of all wayfarers who traverse the circle of wayfaring, mastery, death, and bringing others to follow that circle. Right? Without end. Also that as well.
Right.
So the neophyte is potentially the master. Should the falcon become the Simorgh?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. Obviously, like I haven't, I mean, I've had some very interesting experiences in terms of like psychedelics use, but it was a long time ago, and it was never in the context of spiritual wayfaring. I have to say, like, as opposed to you, who actually was intentionally spiritual wayfaring, like all of my psychedelic experiences were in a much more, in an immature, ridiculous sense that really didn't have anything to do, at least not that I knew of at the time, with the spiritual dimension. It was much later after the fact that I kind of, am kind of connecting certain experiences with the spiritual dimension. But at the time I had no idea. And it's very, yeah, it's hard to relate. So that's kind of
Well,
what I'm struggling with.
From this worldview, every state is a spiritual experience. It's just the difference is one is veiled and one is unveiled. So it's just the difference between a veiled experience of spirit and an unveiled experience of spirit. What psychedelics will do invariably, even if you have no intention of wayfaring or any spiritual intention at all with these plants, is that it will give you a spiritual experience based on where you're at when you take that, plant. Because plants are arguably the most spiritualized of entities on this planet, at least, if you think of it. So when you ingest the plant and it gives you that kind of a, unnormal experience by opening your mind and showing you, first of all, you see basically the whole content of what's Suhrawardi. You see these lights and wheels and flashes, all of it occur. Whether you do it with mushroom or, even smoking some cannabis can do exactly. This is one of the reasons why the Agoris and the sadhus are incessantly smoking cannabis or hash in India. That's their pretty much their constantly. They're consuming lots and lots and lots of this stuff. But even with an ascetic practice of, not eating or, just allowing the mind to waste its own initial content at the surface, you can have exactly the same kind of experiences. Full on. Even more, sometimes these ascetic practices can even function in a more, can become a lot more intense than even taking a mushroom.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not necessary to um, to be like in an ecstatic state to relate to the content of this treatise. I mean,
No.
there's that element, but also just an everyday, ordinary, sober state of mind. There's still a lot of, everything that we're reading still applies to everyday life.
Yeah.
Right? Would you say?
Well, I mean, this is one of the great takeaways from Ibn Arabi. Every state is a spiritualized, in-Godhead state. It's just the standpoint of the standard that determines how this is experienced as what, whether
Right.
open or a closed state.
Yeah.
So, Suhrawardi has this edginess to him, quasi-dualistic edginess to him, and which is fine, but with Ibn Arabi, we get to really open what all of this means. And so instead of the very simplistic judgment of I am awake, I am unawake, or I am a wayfarer or non-wayfarer, with Ibn Arabi, everything is wayfaring.
Mm.
Right? They're just either doing it consciously or unconsciously. Everything is moving towards God at every moment.
Right.
Everything.
Yeah.
So if that is the case, then you could have these spiritual experiences with the plants. You can have these spiritual experiences with something else. You can have
Right.
a sense of euphoria being at the nightclub, where even, without any substance, even without even being drunk, you can get so ecstatic on the dance floor that you have exactly these experiences, which many people do. I've spoken
Right.
for years to, a lot of clubbers, and, got them to give me contents of their experiences on the dance floor. And some of these ecstatic states that they experience are exactly the very states that the Sufis and the Tantrikas have been always talking about, except with these traditions, there is a very specific sacred content and a very genuine goal that is being, moved towards over a lifetime. Whereas, with the clubbing and the nightclub culture, it's not really about that. But they do get that ecstatic state. They do experience the states, the ahwal.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to jump ahead. I did read ahead most of the next part of the treatise too, and yeah, it's talk about. I used the word futile earlier. I can't seem to escape or shake this feeling of futility with regard to spiritual wayfaring in the material world that we are all living in and experiencing right now. On a daily basis with the being online, getting all of the news, the politics, trying to be a part of the conversation, yet at the same time be detached from it. And you know what I mean? Like the wayfaring and the uh the whole the idea of um oh shoot, what's that word? Oh, sorry. There's a word that's escaping me right now, but anyway, I'm babbling. Never mind. I'll come back to this in the next session because we're going to talk. This gets even deeper and closer to what I have in mind later on in the treatise. So I guess that's all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Jot down your thought before you forget
Yeah.
it for next week. So when next week comes and we finish the treatise, you'll remember what it is, and we can really unpack and explore it.
Okay. Yeah. All right. The word it's Tawheed,
Yeah.
and just trying to reconcile that reality with the million pieces of the social scene and, the political spectrum. And, anyways, we'll talk about that next time.
Sure, no worries.
Thank you.
No worries at all. Anybody else? Haven't heard from Rios today. Are you there? No, I don't think he is. All right. Okay, we went for a full hour. We'll finish this for the Suhrawardi course next week. And those of you coming tomorrow to our Even Arabic, we're almost finished with that. Got probably tomorrow, and then the following week we will start the preamble of the Fusus itself, together with the 12th chapter. So those of you coming tomorrow, I'll see you then. Until then, Yahak.